Hi y'all, it's Trader. Welcome to a mini Book and a Beat. Today I'm going to be briefly going over and roughly summarizing the Fates Thread series, which includes the book The God and the Gimiho and The God and the Guinshin. This is a Korean mythology mystery romance series, essentially. And our main characters are going to be Sega, the god of Korean, or the Korean god of, the Korean trickster god, as well as Kim Hana, who is a Gimiho, which is a nine-tailed fox spirit. She is the Scarlet Fox, which is considered the most infamous Gimiho in this series, as well as Yukisa, who was at one point a shaman before dying and becoming a Guinshin. The first in the series deals with a mystery of world-ending proportions. Sego, our god of tricksters, has been tasked with finding the Scarlet Fox as well as a shadow demon who... and what it is called is not on the back of the book. But this demon has the potential of creating a new dark world within the mortal realm, as well as potentially even killing Sego. So that entire story deals with our inciting incident is Hana ends up killing these two men because they were going to do awful things to her and stealing their livers with her scarlet daggers, which is a mark of the Scarlet Fox. To keep herself and her best friend Some safe, she ends up joining Sego as his assistant. The two of them bicker a crap ton. They have issues, mainly because Hana is a very short-tempered, witty, and incredibly sarcastic character, and Sego cannot put up with it. He is also a very clever and sarcastic character, but he also has the affinity of being a fallen god and therefore looking down on literally everybody. But as the story goes along, they see the first shadow demon's victim, and Hana says, I'm not going to help you find this. Internally says, I'm the Scarlet Fox. I can't help you find her. However, I am going to stop this. I will work with you to stop this. Especially because the first victim is another young Gimiho. As the story progresses, another creature, essentially, is killed, and they find out that there is a witness. There's one singular witness. So they are off at light speed to go ahead and find this witness. They end up in this deeply dense forest area. There's a lot of bickering between Hana and Sego, to the point in which they, actively fight and tumble down a bamboo hill straight to where their witness is. After a little bit of fighting of some pudgy baby demons, there's a lot of Korean names for these creatures that I am skipping because I did not have the foresight to look ahead to see how they're pronounced because I didn't listen to the audiobooks. I physically read these. As they get the witness, Sego has dulled a lot of his powers because of being a fallen god. However, he still is able to compel people to speak truths. He can essentially worm his way into their mind. So he's able to get a little information out of this witness. Enough information to, as they suspected before leaving, essentially confirm that their mortician, their forensic pathologist, is the murderer. He was already locked up at this point, just due to a fairly understandable hunch. They decide to call back to the precinct to try and inform them, and they get nothing. It's radio silence on that end. So this essentially confirms something bad happened at the precinct. Our killer was at the precinct. He must be the shadow creature, because they also got information from the witness that confirmed this. So they speed back to the precinct. Our head honcho, our chief, confirms this, tells them all of these people were killed in the night shift. So, oh no, During all of this, Some, who is Hana's friend, ends up killing more people because of cravings, which is essentially when a Gimiho is highly tuned to the power that you get from eating livers or stealing souls. So, Hana has to do as she does and protect Some. She goes and destroys the evidence, all of these things. As now both Hana and Seigo have gotten closer, it is a lot harder for Hana to continue to keep these secrets from him, particularly when they have a future-seeing nymph that they go and see, who pretty much just tells Seigo, yep, both of them are really close to you. And he's like, Some and the forensic pathologist, both of those are wrong. So they're getting closer. They're being more lovey-dovey. It's clear that they're falling for each other. They join up with the Undertaker who kind of pops in and out throughout the rest of the story, and work with him to get to this shadow demon. Surprise, surprise! Some gets charged, assumed, told to Seigo that she is the Scarlet Fox, and Hana's like, oh crap. After two failed attempts to get our shadow demon, they decide that, okay, we're gonna look and see who dies, not who exactly, but how many people die tonight. Depending on how many people, we might be able to find him and track him. That's what they do. He had sent Some, the shadow demon had sent Some to kill a bunch of people. They follow her scent all the way back to this warehouse. They get up on the roof to try and sneak down. The roof breaks down underneath them. They kill a bunch of creatures, unrulies. And then, who shows his face? The Undertaker and Some. Big fight breaks out, and we got a lot of, like, really cool, like, writing and just Hana being a badass. This is one of the few books that, like, when they say, oh yeah, the main female character kicks ass, she actually does. She is the one who saves herself and ends up saving Soga in the end. But that's because she makes a deal with his brother, who happens to be the Heavenly Emperor and is the one who gave Seigo these instructions to kill the Shadow Demon and the Scarlet Fox at the very beginning to lessen his sentence on Earth. They make a deal. Hana is barely hanging on as Seigo crawls to her, and she goes, "It wasn't all a lie," and helps him plunge her dagger into her own heart, and that is how we end the story. More or less. Seigo does, like, very angrily demand things of his brother, and he goes, "Fine, she'll be reincarnated, and you'll know who it is because of her eyes." And that's how we get into the next book. I would like to mention before I get into this book a couple of trigger warnings. Self-harm, suicide, depression, isolation, manipulation, general fantasy, and gore. All of those very fun things. This book frustrated me. The God and the Gwynson. So, Hana's been reborn as Kisa. I love Kisa. I loved Hana. I love both of their characters. I deeply enjoy both ways that they are written because they are so totally different characters. Kisa is brilliant in the way that her mind works. She is hyper intelligent and she's incredibly socially awkward. But in the very first chapter, she dies, and the entire time that this book goes on, except for the last, 20%, we are under the assumption that Kisa jumped. Under the assumption of that for the entirety of the book, except for the last 80 pages. I deeply enjoyed this book until the last 80 pages. So, anyways, the red string of fate appears on her finger. We cut to Sega running through Seoul, trying to find his soulmate. It's been 33 years since the first book, and he has changed a lot, mainly because of Hana, but he's also very overworked and depressed. So he's going to a therapist. Running through Seoul, he doesn't find her. He's suddenly now searching for the next, I think it's like 10 to 18 years, going to Antarctica because the string is pulling straight down. Turns out, Kisa's just in hell. I'm doing great. His therapist goes, I'm prescribing you a vacation. You need to take a vacation. And his brother agrees. So the three of them get on the undead cruise ship, which is essentially a cruise ship that takes dead souls to go and get reincarnated. Kisa's working on there because she has a lot of karma to make up for. She has so much karma, and Kisa's very confused because she was incredibly hardworking in real life, in her life. Hana wasn't, so she's currently paying the debts of her previous life. Sega gets on board. He finds Kisa. Great, wonderful things, right? No, Kisa, as I said, is very intellectual and very awkward, and the red string is simply a fascination to her, which is sad and depresses Sega, because Kisa's not Hana, and there's a massive theme in this is the ship of Theseus. That is a pretty regular thing that gets brought up throughout the entirety of the book, and I understand why, and I think it's a good analogy. So, little difficulty with them. Sega ends up breaking out into a fight, because you want to know who else is on board? Some who, as mentioned in the last book, betrayed him and Hana, and he wanted to kill her. And Hana said, no, this is my fault, you don't kill her, and Sega went, fine, and let her live. She's now dead, obviously. I'm speed running through this so I can just say all of my thoughts at the very end. So they're on the ship. There's a little bit of a kerfuffle at a greenhouse party, because, as I mentioned, Some is there, and Sego's displeased, incredibly, and fights her. His brother, pulls him off. His therapist, lectures him. He separates off. They all go their separate ways. He meets back up with Kisa, and they go up to the top deck, have fun, and that sounds like an innuendo. They watch mermaids. And then as they're coming down, his brother's dead body. Just there, on the floor. And Sego's like, what the hell? His brother pops back as a baby because gods can't be killed properly, except by the shadow demons from the first book. So his brother's still alive, just a baby, which makes for a lot of comedical things, which is kind of nice. Our crew is now brought into a murder mystery that the god of death says, you have to figure this out because I cannot have the emperor die on my cruise ship. Figure it out. Thus begins wacky hijinks with a dead idol star who died in a very sad, sad way. If you remember my trigger warnings, I think you can tell why. Who's very sweet and a very fun character. I'm not going to talk about him much because he doesn't do much. Some, our Gimiho from the first book, Kisa, and Sega, who is no longer a fallen god and has been fully reinstated, so he has all of his powers now, except for his mind-reading abilities. For some odd reason, they don't exist anymore. Anyways, he takes his antidepressants at 7 p.m. every single night. Okay. So, hijinks ensue. They assume that it is the head of security and one of these waiters on the boat because they see them sneaking around in the brothers' rooms. Turns out they're just part of godly gospel, and they end up strong-arming Sega into doing a private interview with them for an hour. So, of course, they're not the ones who are the issue. A couple more sleuthing, more getting to know each other between Kisa and Seigo. They're actually super cute together. I enjoy their relationship just like I enjoyed Seigo and Hana's relationship. Both of them feel very fulfilling throughout the entire book, but I'm going to get back to that after I finish. I'm essentially just speed running the mystery, and I will talk more in depth about characters at the end. Whee! After getting clues and those clues not working, moving forward to the next potential people. They assume that Seigo's nephew is the one who killed his father. And after seeing the captain get killed, not seeing, they hear it over the intercom, and it is the cruise director's voice and the nephew's voice. So Seigo's like, it was them. God of Death comes down, not smites, but he takes the cruise director under arrest, puts her in one of the 7 hells, and his nephew is on the run. At this point, we've been given small breadcrumbs throughout the entire book about the therapist. Her lotion smells a lot like anti-aging cream. And Kisa's allergic to cats and sneezes when she is in the room of the therapist. Anyways, more not happy fun times, but more bonding and getting to know each other between Kisa and Seigo. And then a nightmare where Hana shows up and makes Kisa die over and over and over again. After Kisa just admitted to her closest friends and fated mate, they're called threaded in this series, not the point, that she was actually murdered. She didn't jump off, she was murdered. And Hana makes her relive it multiple times in her dreams before Kisa finally puts together the pieces that, oh my god, it's the therapist. The therapist murdered me, as well as is the one who murdered the emperor. And this whole thing was a plot to get Seigo to let his father out of his chains from underneath the river that they were cruising on. That obviously doesn't happen. There's this big kind of like fight scene that happens. I truthfully skimmed it. After I found out that the therapist was the villain, I skimmed everything from then on. Seigo says, flips his dad right off, walks out. He is actively like interim heavenly emperor. I said it 3 times because his brother is the interim to his mother, his nephew is the interim to his brother, and he is the interim to his nephew. Anyways, so with his only ability to be able to do anything, he sits on the throne to grant a wish, just one wish, to his fated, to his threaded, and it's to make her the ghost within the heavenly libraries, which need a lot of work to get them back in working order. And that's where we end the book. Seigo is taking care of his little brother, who's actually his older brother, and Kisa is repairing the library. They live in a little cottage in the middle of this forest library, and then his mom shows up. His mom, who's been sleeping for thousands of years, who is the actual heavenly empress. So yeah. Thoughts and opinions. I have lots of thoughts and opinions. But we're going to start with The God and the Gumiho first. I enjoy this book. I do think the mystery is a little half-baked, just because I heavily disliked the twist villain at the very end, with it being the Undertaker instead of the forensic pathologist. The Undertaker had essentially dressed up as our forensic pathologist, who was a really sweet man and just wanted to be friends with Seigo, and it made me feel sad and I didn't like it. But the character and relationship building between Seigo and Hana is very good in this book because the book resolves around just the 2 of them. There are a couple of other secondary characters such as Some, the Undertaker, as well as the Chief. However, they're not big enough in the story to heavily impact it, besides, you know, being the main villain and being a secondary villain at the very end. There's a lot of very cute moments. Hana in this is very brash and abrasive and ends up meeting Seigo where he is in being kind of a dick. She is able to essentially thaw his very icy outside and make it a lot easier for Kisa in the future. I would also like to mention that the relationship that they have, the way that Seiga is written, the way that he acts, I want to preface this by saying this is not a bad thing. This is not a negative. This is not a slight against the author. The guy sounds like Loki in every single YA X Loki fanfic. He's only soft for her. He's icy exterior, green eyes, black hair. I'm aware that that's probably how the god looked in this mythos. That is fine. I enjoyed this. So obviously from the very beginning, I'm trying, oh, this is Loki. He has a snake staff. Snake cane. I'm reading it and feeling this is Loki. That does continue into the next book. That characterization continues into the next book. So, for any Marvel girlies who are out there and just want, like, a good and well-written, like, published romance about Loki, this is really good. Also, if you're not into that, this is also still a really good book. The mystery feels better in this one. Seigo is a better detective in this one, and the story seems to make more sense with the mystery itself. You don't feel like you're getting jerked around the entire time, and while I personally didn't enjoy the twist villain, I do see why people would enjoy the twist villain in this one, because it still makes sense. There are still little crumbs throughout, not as big as the ones in the second book, but still enough where you could sit there and go, okay, I can see how that happened. Plus, the relationship between Hana and Some in this is incredibly interesting, how Hana unintentionally corrupts Some. I enjoy this book. I think the villain is interesting, well-written, and a very, like, he's just a manipulative little piece of shit. It's enjoyable. On to the God and the Queenson. Now, okay, so once again, I still very much enjoy Seigo and Kisa's relationship in this. I think it's very interesting how he could be the same with Hana with Kisa while both of them are still very different people. They shared the same soul at one point, and the general consensus with the theme of the Ship of Theseus is that both ships are the same. There's different parts, but at the heart of it, they are the same. Both Hana and Kisa are still incredibly loyal, courageous, and brave people, which are the things that Seigo liked most about both of them. So, that was very nice. I liked that. I also really liked the idea that Hana was there first to ensure that Seigo could love Kisa when they became threatened. It was very nice, and I enjoyed the fact that they, with the red thread, could kind of like speak into each other's minds fragmentedly and not intentionally, as well as feeling each other's emotions. I did think that it helped. Them being threaded helped the dissonance of them falling in love in like 4 days. But even with them falling in love in 4 days, it felt good. Because we, as the readers, know that they're supposed to be together. So it was enjoyable. I very much liked it. I really liked Seigo's relationship with his brother in this book, because while they have been rivals this entire time, in the 30 years they started getting a little bit closer to friends, and with his brother end up dying, Seigo is actually able to take on a brotherly role with his older brother and care for him, and at this point is essentially raising him, because his brother is a baby. Kisa is also just really good with kids because of who her patron deity was as a shaman, which was the goddess of fertility, motherhood, and childbirth. So that all felt very nice. I enjoyed Kisa's relationship with her best friend Haju, who is a K-pop idol who had a very dark history. and had a lot of issues. Kisa is able to just kind of be there for him, and it's just fun to see that relationship. It is also incredibly fun to see the secondary relationship that forms in this book, which is between Some and said friend. It's just cute. Some knows what to do to help him. He had an eating disorder in the real world and had a lot of difficulty eating the fake food with no caloric intake here, but Some is able to reach out to him and get him to drink boba consistently. It's like a whole thing in this book. It's so cute. Their relationship is very interesting because Some is pretending to be Hana for a lot of it. She has taken on characteristics of Hana in her grief, which Sega has a lot of difficulty with. This book has some really great commentary on grief and how people handle it differently. Sega and Hana are both grieving, or not Hana, Sega and Some are both grieving Hana, and Kisa is Hana, and both of them have difficulties with it, but both of them still want to be part of Kisa's life. I think the character writing in this is brilliant. I think the twist villain sucks. For a book that puts such high weight and importance on getting help, they praise Sega for being in therapy, and Sega genuinely feels like therapy has been very helpful to him. Kisa says, if maybe I went to therapy, I wouldn't have been sitting on top of that roof. If Haju went to therapy, maybe things would have turned out differently for him. Maybe they would all still be alive. And then the therapist is the villain. The therapist wasn't giving Sega antidepressants, she was giving him pills to block his mind reading abilities. This was a long con for 33 years. I hate that. I think it is so incredibly disingenuous to this book to have the therapist be the villain. I just think it's bad. For a book that is trying to say that therapy is good, making the therapist a villain is not selling that idea. I will also say you can tell the twist is coming from a good, I think I stopped while I was actively reading this around the 75% mark and went, oh my god, the therapist is going to be the villain. Oh my god, she's trying to get the mad god out, and Sega's the only one who can do it. And I hated that. I would have loved the idea of a therapist actually being like, hey, it's okay if you love your father still, even though he's a bad guy, because complex father relationships are an actual thing in real life. Somebody can be a bad person and you could still want to love them and still want their approval. And I think it would have been great if the therapist had actually helped him work through that, rather than just manipulating him and using it to get the mad god out. This book was so good up until that 66 to 75% mark, when you could see the writing on the wall about the therapist being the bad guy. And I hated it. As I mentioned, I skimmed the last couple of chapters. I did I skimmed the 4 chapters before the last 4 chapters, and then I properly read the last 4 chapters because it was not dealing with the plot point that I hated. I enjoyed most of this book. I think it was incredibly well written, but that ending made it a 3-star for me. This would have been a 5-star book. I don't like it when therapists are the villains. That doesn't feel good or genuine in a world that frankly just needs people to go to and seek mental health. So that's how I feel about those books. Once again, Sophie Kim is so good with character interaction writing. She knows how to build up character relationships in an incredibly genuine and authentic way that feels good. My only issue is primarily with her way that she writes mysteries and the difficulty that she seems to have without having a plot twist villain. You can have a villain that just makes sense. You can have a villain that's a villain from the very beginning, and that's completely okay. I don't know. like this series for its character writing. However, its mystery is very lackluster in my opinion, and at times incredibly frustrating. So that is my take on the Fates Thread series. Usually this would be a proper book and a beat, but I did my makeup beforehand because I did a first take that I was not enjoying. But each eye represents each of the books. Of course, my left side is for the god Ilgimi-ho and represents Hana, and then my right side is for Kisa. Throughout the books, Hana is mentioned for her vibrant red hair that she keeps dyed, and Kisa is a ghost and therefore has blue blood. So, that's pretty much it for my review on the Fated Thread series by Sophie Kim. If another book does come out, I would probably read it in all honesty, mainly because I am interested to see the character relations in the next book, particularly with Seigo's mother appearing at the very end of The God in the Gwynson. So yeah, that's it. Feel free to leave your guys' comments in the description below, and I will see you guys in the next video.